Are you curious about what it takes to create and monetize successful podcasts? Join me on this episode as we explore the strategies behind podcast production and distribution. I'm Devin Herz. Welcome to the DMC Marketing Nugget. All right, let's rock. Today we have a very special guest. Jeff Umbro is the founder and CEO of The Podglomerate, an industry-leading podcast services company that focuses on production, distribution, and monetization of podcasts with a stellar portfolio that includes collaborations with Freakonomics Radio, Harvard Business School, Harvard, all right, and PBS. Jeff brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. Let's dive into the world of podcasting. Welcome, Jeff Umbro.
Hey, thanks for having me, Devin. This is going to be really fun.
Good deal. Well, we obviously have our own podcast, the DMC Marketing Nugget, which people are watching right now. We still have a lot to learn in the podcasting world, so I'm hoping that not only for our viewers, we're always a little bit greedy here on this show. We want to learn too from our guests. So let's kick things off and get an understanding of how you got started in the podcasting industry and really what inspired you to launch the Podglomerate.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm always happy to give out free nuggets of advice. So I'm Jeff Umbro. I'm the founder and CEO of The Podglomerate. The Podglomerate today is a podcast services firm that focuses on production, audience development, and monetization for podcasts. And we work with all kinds of really amazing brands and companies and other podcasts. So I started the company back in 2017. Prior to that, I was a book publicist, and I actually had a podcast myself where I would interview authors. And one of the reasons why I loved that initiative that I was doing on the side was that I could monetize it a little bit, both with advertising and events and that kind of thing, but also I could bring authors from the podcast into the PR firm that I worked at. And I would get like a little commission whenever I like brought those folks over, little referral fee. And it was really exciting because it was the first time that, I realized like, oh, the side hustle stuff that people talk about, it actually works. And also it really showed me that there are a lot of different opportunities to monetize podcasts beyond what you would typically expect with like premium subscriptions or ad sales or something like that. And I was just kind of in love with the world. Like I really was having more fun doing that side of my job than any other part of the job. So I decided I was just going to jump right in, and I tried to get a job elsewhere in podcasting. And like my skill set was very unique, and ended up being kind of perfect for what like we ultimately ended up doing. But at the time, I didn't have any direct podcast experience professionally, and I just had trouble getting the gig. So I just decided to do it on my own. And fast forward, and we have 10 employees. We're doing great stuff. Happy to dive into all of that, but that's how it got started. That was the secret sauce.
Good deal. And we need people like you because obviously back when COVID was a thing, I know it's still around, but not as much. Podcasting blew up, and it was big before that, but it really spiked. So everyone and their mom was doing a podcast. So obviously you got to stand out in this day and age. How do we differentiate? So we'll get into some of this here, but you guys are now representing more than 70 plus podcasts. You have over 30 million monthly downloads. What strategies have you found to be the most effective in growing and scaling a podcast network to this level?
Yeah. So I want to just take one step back because we do a bunch of different things. And like the numbers that you mentioned are in reference to kind of a combination of all of them. So we produce podcasts. So we make shows for third parties, including, media companies, think tanks, universities, and others. And then we also make shows on our own for fun, our own owned and operated vehicles. We also market podcasts. So we will do PR campaigns, marketing campaigns, podcast cross promos, paid acquisition, pitching the podcasting apps. And we do that on behalf of 30 or 40 different shows, including, Netflix, PBS, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, many others. And then in addition to that, we represent about 30 shows for ad sales on our network. That represents on its own a little shy of 10 million downloads a month. And so combined, all of these, like our 70 plus shows and, 30 million downloads a month and all of that stuff. And but the way that we actually were able to grow to that point is really just by building this network brick by brick. I always say that the best marketing for a company is word of mouth, and you get word of mouth marketing by just doing it, a really, really good job. So initially, the company was just me. Since then, I've brought on a lot of people to help. We have 10 employees, and I have partners throughout the business, and I could not have done what I've done without every single one of them. But yeah, we just do, in my opinion, like really great work on behalf of our clients, to the point where not only do they come back for more whenever they need like any kind of initiative to grow, to produce, to monetize their shows, but they also are telling all of their friends about us. In addition to that, we have this whole strategy for outbound marketing, and like we speak at events, we do contributed pieces, we do interviews like this, we have a great website, and we do all the SEO and content development and such. But really, it's word of mouth marketing that has driven the company to the scale that it is today. And yeah, I can dive into any independent or individual like strategies on how we did that. But what would be most interesting for you?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think people, well, if I build it, they will come. If I have a podcast, I'm going to have an audience. There's so much more that goes into it than just throwing a
Yeah,
podcast together. So that's really where you guys come in, because even for our
yeah,
podcast, we're not necessarily thinking about things of monetization, cross branding, some of those things that you're doing. So I guess just if there was
yeah.
one of those specific strategies, is there one that stands out to you that you feel will help grow a
Sure.
podcast more than anything else?
Yeah, I think honestly, like the number one thing that most people, in my opinion, should be doing is just trying to build their network. And I know that that sounds like cliche and cheesy, but every guest that you have on the show is a potential like piece of that network. Every listener that you have is somebody who can help to grow your show. Um, and there are like direct strategies on how to do that. Like you can be really deliberate with who you're booking on the show. It could be like your exact target audience, or like the person that has a network that they can send to their email newsletter list or something. There are
Right.
strategies that you can put within the podcast itself, and actually like ask your listeners to share the episode on their particular platforms, review the show, which creates social validation on places like Apple and Spotify,
Okay.
leave a comment if you're going to put it on YouTube. Um, and there's like good and bad ways to do all of these things, but like really building relationships is much better than trying to like kind of preach to the audience. So
Yes.
what I mean by that is really like you know if a listener emails you and says like, "Hey, I love this episode that you did on, I don't know, website development or something," then
Sure.
like you can build a conversation around that and like begin to really have like a relationship with that person. So then the next time somebody needs help with their digital marketing or web development or whatever, like you're the first call that they're going to make. Um,
Gotcha.
Podcasting is funny. Everybody's looking for this like massive audience, and they all want to be the next Joe Rogan, but like if you even have 20 people listening to your show, like you basically have 20 people who are listening to you speak every day, and or whatever, weekly, monthly, and like listen to your ideas and really connect with that. And you get this super intimate parasocial relationship where you're speaking directly most times into somebody's like headphones or something. um
Right.
it's a really powerful device to kind of achieve whatever you're hoping to achieve. And the second thing is and I'll drop it in a second because I could go all day here, but it's just
No
like be
problem.
really deliberate with what your goal. be super deliberate with what your goals are. Like before you start a podcast or before you advertise on a show or guest on a show or whatever, like take a piece of paper and write down like what you're hoping to achieve, and just be transparent. No need to make anybody read your mind. Just say the thing that you're hoping to achieve, and hopefully it's mutually beneficial and works out for everybody. So
I think that's a great nugget. I think if you don't have a focus or a goal or know your avatar and the perfect clients that you're going after, it's going to be very hard for you to cater your podcast to them. So
yeah,
I think that's a great nugget there, is to understand that. And we're not all going to be Joe Rogan. We're not all going to be having millions of followers out there. And I think some of us business owners get caught up in this whole talent show, whether it be on social media or podcasts, that we've got to be as big as some of these. Look, just like professional sports, becoming a famous actor, there's only a small percentage that are going to have the huge blowups and the huge followers. You just need to have the right audience, and it can be those key small audiences, more of that targeted group of people that make a difference in your business. So I think that's a great nugget there. As a business owner, entrepreneur, I would say a majority of us love to make money. I know things as we get a little bit older, maybe priorities may change a little bit, but still love to make money. We focus on things that are gratifying to us, things that make us happy, which I think is important for anyone out there. But monetizing the show is definitely something that you offer as a key service. How do people even think about monetizing this, and how can new podcasters start monetizing their shows effectively?
Sure. So this is another instance where I would say like sit down and think about your goals. Like if you are trying to monetize, there are a lot of different ways to monetize any media property and also podcasts. You have advertising revenue, you have event revenue, you have premium subscription revenue, you have like donations or like community building, you have lead generation. So like step one is just identifying like what are you hoping to do here? Is this like top of funnel or bottom of funnel? Uh, and there are a bunch of ways to like monetize a podcast, whether or not you have a podcast of your own. Like you may think about them differently, and like the language is probably a little bit different. But like you can create a podcast, which could be an avenue for you guys to generate advertising if you can get to the right scale. And I'll come back to that in a second. Or it could be a vehicle where you are using it to like reach your target audience directly, whether it's the guests on the show or whether it's the listeners of the show. We had a client years ago who they sold a software suite that cost like $50,000 a month. And the idea was that it would make your email sales like 1% more efficient. There's not that many people who are interested in that software, but the people who are like really want it. So like they only had CMOs on their show of like, big companies with like 10,000 employees plus. And so they got 24 people a year. They released every other week. They got 24 people a year where they could put them in a room and talk about their services for an hour, whether it was before the interview, after the interview, and like learn more about what their use cases were and that kind of thing. And they did that by using the podcast as the vehicle to bring them into the room. And that's really cool. You get one client, you're going to pay for the production of that podcast 10 times over. So like that is one way in which you can consider monetizing a show. When I was talking earlier about my writing podcast and I would bring people into the production or the PR company, I would only make, a few grand, but that was huge to me. That was my goal. It was just to make a few extra bucks to like pay rent one month or something. And then there's the idea of just like, you don't have to necessarily launch a new show in order to like get the same access and reach those same goals. You can advertise on existing shows. You can pitch yourself as a guest on existing shows and kind of like use the audiences that already exist on these other properties as opposed to building one of your own. Now going back to the monetization side, because I think that most people, that's kind of the first thing they think about when it comes to how do I make money on my podcast. There's what I'm about to say is my version of this. There are a million versions of this. Like you guys should Google and like do your research and everything. But generally speaking, in order for a show to really like make economic sense to monetize, at least at the Podglomerate, we're looking for shows that have about 50,000 downloads per month or more. And we actually have a sliding
Okay.
scale. We have shows that are like under 100,000 a month. We have shows between 100 and 250, and then we have shows above 250. And we monetize shows, and again, this is just Podglomerate, through direct sales relationships with brands and agencies. So we would go to a BetterHelp or the agency that represents HelloFresh or something like that. We would say like, hey, we have this great marketing show that reaches 50,000 people every month. Here's the audience demographics. Like, would you like to purchase advertising on that show? It's usually based on number of impressions or timing or something like that. And you negotiate, you barter that relationship, and you sell those impressions for a CPM, and you go from there. Like, you deliver whatever they buy: pre-roll, mid-roll, host read, producer read, endorsement, whatever. There are ways that you can track effectiveness of those ads using things like Chartable Pixels or Spotify Ad Analytics Pixels. And you can track, contrary to popular belief, audio to web. There is a way to do that.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
Spotify Ad Analytics, if you guys want to Google it. But so that's the main way to make money on a show that has the right scale. An additional way to make money on ads on a podcast, really, whether you have scale or not, it's just like, if you don't have scale, it depends on if this situation will be worthwhile to you, just based on what
Right.
you would get in like return on investment. But programmatic advertising using platforms like Megaphone's Span, the Spotify ad network, Simplecast has something called AdSwiz. Omni has their own version of a programmatic ad network. AdvertiseCast and Libsyn have their version of a programmatic ad network. And then there's the idea, I don't know if your listeners are aware of this, but it's called a VAST integration. And it's basically a way in which, with the right software, you can plug in any kind of SSP into your podcast platform. And, to put it bluntly, like, the more scale that you bring in, the lower your CPM is going to go. So you can serve a lot more ads and make potentially a lot less money. But there are a lot of different ways in which you can activate this stuff. And like, anybody's welcome to reach out to me to discuss, or to, check out Podglomerate's website, or to just Google and find out. Like, all this information is public. But yeah, it's a pretty simple math problem. You're going to get a CPM times the number of impressions that you deliver times the number of ad markers that you have. So like, just pretending you have 10,000 downloads a month, you're selling it at a $25 CPM, and you have 4 ads on every show, and you sell 2 of them because this month was slow and you only got to sell 50% of your inventory.
Gotcha.
And you're looking at $500 a month. So,
Okay.
so yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Not,
There's a lot of math here, but like, that's how I monetize podcasts.
yeah, that's why we need Jeff, because I didn't even know some of those apps that I mean, we're pretty knowledgeable when it comes to apps and what's fresh, but this is your world, and that's why we love this show, because it creates relationships for us too. I mean, there's been so many times. I guess another way to monetize this, right, is the guests that we work with. And it may not be where we're doing direct business with our guests, but I can't tell you how many times, whether it's someone that had a service or a product that one of our needed. So the connections, the relationship building, people value that too when you're just referring people that we've had as guests. So I think there's that aspect to it as well. But I can't wait to talk to you offline about more of this too, because we've been putting in energy for this show for quite some time. Get good reviews when I talk to people. Just had my 30-year high school reunion. Getting old, but I can't. I mean, the people that came up to me and was like, I don't even know these people watch the show, that they even exist in my world when it comes to marketing, because I haven't seen them for 30 years. But I had probably about 5 people come up to me saying, I watch the Nuggets. I find them inspiring. I love what you're doing. And I'm like, holy shit. Okay, next time, go ahead and leave a comment, right? So it's nice to know that people are out there. People do watch this. And it is a great way to get content out there that not only resides on a podcast or YouTube, but it is also something that you can chop up into a million shorts and use on social media as well. So moving on to data-driven experimentation, I know that's a core value at Podglomerate. How do you go ahead and balance the data insights with creative freedom when creating a podcast these days?
Sure. That is literally the $1 million question, by the way. So I'll
Okay,
take my best
bring
stab at it. And I do
bring
think
it.
about this every day. Uh, so podcasting is weird. Anybody who experiments in the field or has a podcast, I'm sure you, Devin, experience this all the time. Uh, it's kind of purposely set up as this siloed ecosystem where you have your hosting platform. It spits out an RSS feed. That RSS feed is fed into Apple and Spotify and Pandora and whatever, and you get like really disjointed data back. So your hosting platform will usually tell you like how many people downloaded the episode, when they did it, where they did it, but you don't get any kind of granular information about like how much of the episode did they listen to, unless your show's on YouTube, which has a whole other problem of like just resource
Right.
constraints. And uh, and even that, like, it's a different audience on Apple versus Spotify versus YouTube. Every one of them is going to listen to the show differently, uniquely, and in their own way. Some of them are going to be actively seeking the show. Some of them are going to be fed the show via algorithms. Um, so you get this disjointed data. So like step one is figuring out how you can understand the data that you're seeing. And I actually recommend my colleague Dan Meisner at a company called Bumper has this really amazing article. If you guys search Bumper and then downloads versus listens, this article will come up.
Okay.
And he really has like this very insightful piece. It's a kind of soapbox that he's been on for a long time, and I'm glad he is because it's really fascinating to take his opinion on it. But um, in short, a listen and a download are not created equal. They're very different things. Many of the people who are downloading your show may not be actually listening to the show. So it's really important to get that granular data of like your consumption side, which you can get on Apple and Spotify and YouTube, both all individually based on those platforms, not like fed into your hosting platform. You can also collect attribution data for like which marketing and like effects are working. So your chartable smart links and smart promos, your Spotify ad analytics. So anyway, step one, getting your data in order, making sure that your tech stack is built out properly. That's a whole thing. Assuming you have your data and you can trust it, then you want to be looking at like how people are actually engaging with the show. So you can, contrary to popular belief, understand like which of your marketing initiatives are driving net new devices versus total downloads. So then from there, you can build a formula that says like, this newsletter promoted the podcast and I got 20 new people who downloaded the show, but it was like 80 downloads. So you can assume that some of those are super listeners who downloaded like 10 episodes. Some of them maybe downloaded one or
Right.
two episodes. And so you can kind of figure out like how people are engaging with the show. Some of the most common questions we get are like where people are listening. So we build out a report. It's like a share of ear. So you can see exactly how many people are listening on like each different user agent and where you should spend your time promoting the show via Apple, Sirius XM, Pandora, whatever. And then a second popular report is just consumption data. So like how long should a podcast episode be? My answer to that is it should be as long as it needs to be. But I know that that's not satisfying and doesn't have any like real data that goes into it. NPR has a stat internally where they say that a podcast episode should be about 22 minutes, and that's based on their own
Okay.
consumption data and like how people are engaging with the show. Generally speaking, if it's like a chat show, I think people should be ruthless. I think they should chop out anything that's not adding value. A colleague of mine uses this stat. It's called insights per minute. Like if you're not
Okay.
learning something every minute that you're listening, then you should cut it from the episode. Um, Most people
That's
don't do
good.
that. You can find plenty of shows that are hours long. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcast in the world, and he goes for 4 hours most of the time. Um, so that's where you get the idea of like the show should be as long as it needs to be. I just think that asking the question at all is really important, and when you ask about like data versus creative freedom, the way that we think about it at Podglomerate is like you should always be aware of the data and how people are engaging with the show. And you should use that to kind of add insight into those creative decisions that you are making. You should not be making a show in a vacuum because you assume that it's what people want. You should be listening to the
Sure.
data to see like what people are actually like what they're engaging with and what they're not engaging with, and use that to add value to the editorial. Um, Most people are like initially pretty bad at this, and it takes a long time to like figure out like, you know, what you should be including in the show. So you should take those listeners that you're building these relationships with, and you should learn from them. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer, and I could go all day on this, but
It is. I mean, being that we're creatives, that creative and data side is always, it's tough, right? I mean, one, just taking the time out of your day to look at numbers for a creative person is sometimes tough. To understand what those numbers even mean, I mean, that's a whole nother world with the way some of these people
yeah.
put out stats. So I think it's super
In
important to look at analytics. I mean, and that's throughout your
Yeah.
entire business, not just podcasting. Your analytics are key because as a business owner, you think things are going great. Like for instance, we had Facebook campaigns. We generated over 400 opt-ins, 400 leads from a Facebook campaign that we developed over the last couple months. I was like, this is amazing. It's unbelievable. Yes, I can continue to market to them, try to sell them. Great. Conversion rates were like this. So when you
Yeah.
look at the analytics versus conversions, you can really tell, okay, well, we need to steer another way, or we need to try another way to push this. We know we get opt-ins. We just need to maybe change the content a little bit, change the offer a little bit. So it's constantly that testing and measuring to make a campaign really the best it could be, make a podcast the best it can be. So make
Yeah.
sure you are looking at those
And
analytics. And if you don't know what the heck you're looking at, make sure you have someone that does. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, and in addition to that, like one of the like most basic levels of doing this within the podcast universe is like maybe you are a company that is buying advertising on podcasting in order to sell a product. You
Mm-hmm.
can measure how many people are listening to that ad, how many of those went to your website, and how many of those people purchased something on your website. Uh, or if you're not selling like a product or a service or something, like there are other things that you can measure. So it's really it expands beyond just like being a podcast creator. It's also like if you're utilizing podcasts as like a buying platform, there are ways that you can learn these things, and to this exact same logic that you're using for your Facebook campaign, like you can tweak the copy, you can change the shows that
Mm-hmm.
you're advertising on, you can add frequency capping or put it in like a different DMA or something. There are a lot of different
Yeah.
initiatives that you can take to make it more effective. And we want that. We want people who are having like
Yeah.
great experiences on podcast ads because we want to sell more of them.
Absolutely. Amen. Back to the money. All
Yeah.
right. Well, this has been awesome so far. Lots of nuggets here for people out there that are looking to potentially do a podcast, have an existing podcast. You're spending the time to do it right. Work with
Yeah.
someone like Jeff to really help elevate what you've got going on there. So, lastly, what advice would you give someone that is just now considering to start their own podcast or podcast network? It's very
Mhm.
competitive. What would that advice be to the newbie?
Yeah. So my first piece of advice is just like love what you do. Uh, I did not start this company to make money. In fact, I didn't think that I would. Uh,
Okay.
and I literally launched this company from my parents' basement because like I couldn't afford to pay my rent while I was like getting it off the ground. And today I'm very happy. Like it's a very successful, profitable business with like a lot of team members, and we get to work with really, really cool people all the time. But
Awesome.
I did this because I loved it. Like there is no other reason for me to do it. I threw away my career at the time in order to start this, and I uh, couldn't be happier that I did it. But expanding that, like that applies to any business, podcasting or otherwise. My fiance actually just started a brick and mortar home goods store, and
Okay.
it's great. I love it. It is so fun. I get PTSD from that because like I've already gone through that process, and
Yes.
but like she loves it. Like this is the thing that makes her happy, and like what she like is excited to wake up and do every day. And and I guess the reason that I mention this is because like step one should be like having a passion for what you're hoping to do. And
True.
then
Yeah.
figure out the rest from there if that exists. Uh, but yeah, just understand what you're getting into. Do your research, like make sure you're prepared, and love what you do because it's not always going to be easy. In fact, it is very rarely easy.
Yes, no, people out there make it sound so easy and all the shit in your social media feeds. You're going to be the best. We're going to help you do this. I mean, I say this all the time. It's not easy. We're realists here on
Yeah.
the show. We speak straight. It is a struggle sometimes in business to stay different, stay unique, to stay consistent. I think if you are considering doing a podcast, consistency, just like any marketing, you got to make sure you're dedicated to it and know
Yeah.
that this is not just, hey, I'm going to do a show once and that's it. You got to stay on it. You got to keep delivering. People want to see consistent content coming out at you. So awesome, awesome
And
stuff.
and
Jeff, is there
also
anything else you want to
also
share? Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say listen to other podcasts. Like find like
Okay.
your ideal show that you want to recreate and like or just shows that you enjoy. Uh you
Yeah.
learn best by experiencing and just seeing how other people are doing it, and it'll trigger a lot of ideas for what you want to do. And the other thing is like make sure you're being realistic. Like to your point about your publishing cadence, like if you don't think that you can publish more than every other week or every other month, like then that is the cadence that you should commit to. You should not try and overexert yourself. So,
Yeah, we all have enough anxiety and stress running a business as is. So yeah,
yeah,
adding the extra pressure on yourself to do a podcast is something that you got to be welcome to and open to. This has been really awesome there, and I think that's a golden nugget just to leave the show today. So really appreciate it. How should people get a hold of you, Jeff, if they want? I think you're offering a free consult on your website. Is that right?
yeah. If you head to podglomerate.com/connect, you guys can shoot us an email.
Okay.
We'll route it to wherever it needs to go. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Jeff Umbro. And I have a podcast called Podcast Perspectives where I have conversations like this every week. So thank you all.
Awesome.
Thank you, Devin, for having me. This was a ton of fun. And yeah, I'm always here if anybody needs anything.
Awesome stuff. So if you guys are considering doing a podcast, you're already doing a podcast and looking to elevate it, make sure you reach out to Jeff. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Love learning all the nuggets from you today, and definitely looking forward to implementing these into our business and into our podcast, and look forward to talking to you after the show here so I can get some more insight on how we can explode this bad boy here. So thanks again. Awesome having you. Go ahead, subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, hit the like buttons. Just show us that you exist out there and that you're loving the show. We appreciate it. Visit dmcmarketingnugget.com for all our episodes. Here's to your success.